Guys, thank you for coming to this Zoom follow-up meeting for the light painting class that we had at IEPPV. You know, Dwayne Murphy, our instructor at the time, he's here as well. Dwayne doesn't have any images to share, so you're going to have to listen to me quite a bit. But I'm pretty sure Dwayne will harass me and keep me on my toes throughout the process. Um, if you have any questions, and I can't stress this enough, please ask them. You can ask them in chat. I'll try to watch the chat. Dwayne will watch the chat for me if I miss something. But just chime in, right? Turn your camera on, wave at me, ask questions. This is for you guys. So as I go through the process, it may not be how you work, or it may not be this program you use. So don't be afraid to chime in.
Turn
I
on
don't
your
really
camera,
have
show Troy what you're drinking, and he'll enjoy the editing all that much more.
yeah, yeah, nothing for me because we'll get off on a serious tangent if that happens. You'll just have to listen to Dwayne and I and Frederick talk and complain about things. Um, so what I'm gonna do basically is I'm gonna take you guys from the beginning, like one kind of how I sort the images and then how I organize them, and then I'm gonna build an image. And it's pretty simple. I'm gonna try to stick pretty basic unless you have some more sophisticated questions, but it'll kind of get you on the road. The light painting techniques, if you don't already know, can be used for all kinds of applications. Everything from, shooting landscapes where you're out and you want to light a foreground object or something that you can't see, or like our friend Jim Doyle, who's in here, like he does a very similar technique how he does his commercial architectural work. With strobes, popping multiple strobes around a room to make sure you got light and dark corners and things. Essentially, it's a really incredibly powerful tool. A lot of times, if you go online and you look up light painting, you see, like a steel wool and light sticks, and you see all that. But that's not really light painting in the sense of kind of where it started foundationally, right? You can paint with flashlights, things like that. There's a gentleman, his name is Eric Curry, Currie, and he does some amazing light painting stuff. He came out and spoke at IEPPV several years ago. I don't know if he's still shooting, if he's still around, but you'll find some like submarines. He did a locomotive. He did some crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. So you can take this stuff really far, create something very unique. So. And so what we've done and what we've touched on is just the surface. Jim Doyle, like his business is based on a lot of these techniques, which is really amazing. So, all right. So let me
Well, the
move some of
alternative to
this.
light painting is buying $50,000 worth of gear that you will probably use once to five times in your life, unless you're Jim.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me get in here. Okay. Yeah, and some of the things like we did all of this stuff with one light. It's one light and it's going to look like there's 12 lights in the shot. And I would suggest that for what we've done and the time that we spent, because some of you guys were there, it would take a lot longer for Dwayne and I to set up lights to light the car, the plane, the hangar, Barry in the hangar. Like it would take a long time to set all that stuff up and trigger them as the lights changing. I think I don't know, Jim can chime in because he does this a lot in his architecture. I think it saves us time to not set all that stuff up sometimes. You know? I don't know, Jim, what do you think?
At one point when we were shooting film and we were painting with uh, hot lights, you would shoot three, maybe four shots in a day. Um, it's certainly changed. It takes about an hour for us to do a big scene, and we're using somewhere around 10 to 12 lights, and then we use additional light, what we call popping with additional light, like you guys were doing.
Yeah.
But we build a base. We have to have a base for our kind of work, and it takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of time. But at the end of the day, you can create really good stuff. And the single light technique is being used by a lot of people, especially in the real estate market.
Right.
They're using that, and then they're doing HDRs with they call them flambients. But it's a technique that's growing, especially with digital and the capabilities we have today.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
It might take more time to set up your 12 lights, but does it take more time in post-production when you're using the one light?
That really depends on who's doing the post and how many times you've done that type of post over and over. Figure the
Yeah.
first time you do this, it's probably going to take 8, 16 hours. After you've done it 10, 20, 50 times, tonight we'll probably knock out what? We're aiming for 2 in less than an hour.
Yeah, I think depending on your goal. Now I know like with Jim, because Jim's a perfectionist, and that's perfect because he's doing this for retail and he's got high-end clients he's working for. What we did, it's absolutely easier to edit this stuff in post. And I'm gonna actually go through, I'm gonna edit an image, we'll assemble it, we're gonna go through the whole process so you can actually see how this works. I just really want to, highlight the idea that this isn't just a gimmicky technique. Like a lot of people think that light painting is just a gimmicky technique, and that's why I wanted to sort of call out Jim for a minute, was because it's not. Like this is a technique that's been around for a long time, and you can use it in multiple ways. Everything from doing macro work to doing portraits to shooting gigantic buildings, which I know Jim does. You can use this technique. So want to kind of just encourage you guys to keep this in the back of your mind. So
The key is you have to visualize in your mind what you want before you start. Okay, you see a scene, I want to light that. I want that scene, but here's what I want it to look like when I'm done. And then you just apply light accordingly. And
Right.
that's the game. That's how it works.
So
here
Cheryl, one of the biggest things that we did was started off by making sure everybody had their cameras mounted on a tripod. And what that allows you to do is simply paint in or paint out where you want the light to be in its most basic form. And then from there, you can use all of the creative tools in Photoshop to take it to anywhere you want to go.
Yep. All right, I am going to share my screen. Let's see, sharing. Okay, there we go. So you guys should be seeing my Capture One. So I'm a Capture One user. If you're using Lightroom, don't feel bad. A lot of people use it. It's okay. But I'm a huge Capture One fan. But it's not going to change the technique, right? It's not going to change your technique. So what we have here is this is a finished image. Dwayne, can you keep an eye on, make sure we get anybody?
I already got it covered, Troy.
Okay, thanks, buddy. So right here, this is an image that we're going to build. We're going to go through this. Now, we have a lot more images than what I used in here. So I built this pretty quickly. So I'm going to walk you guys through that. But there's probably 10 images in this shot. So if we were to try to light this and capture the sky that we want and get Barry in there and not make him sit there forever and get the, like it would take way too long. It just would not be, it would not be super efficient. So let me get back. Okay. So one of the first things that I do, and again, this is something that everybody can do, whether you're in Lightroom or you're in Capture One, and you can, there's other applications, Bridge will let you do this, but not quite as efficient. What I do is these are all the images that we shot. Okay, this is just basically, if we did a time lapse, this is what it looks like. And so it can get really overwhelming. You've got all these images and you're like, what? How do I sort this? How do I organize this? Right? Like it's crazy. So what I like to do is I start off with a first culling, and I use color code. So I like to use colors. So what I do is you can see like down here in the bottom, I'm pointing, you guys can't see me pointing, but it's red. And so that's what I do is so I scroll through the images without worrying about edits, without worrying about sharpening or doing any of that, is I just go through the image and I'm like, ooh, I like that shot. Like there's some light on the car. I might use that. Okay, I'm going to keep that one. And nothing really changed until we get to maybe here. It's a little brighter. I'll keep that one. And you can see as I go through, there's big gaps that I'm not keeping it. So, like Dwayne fired the first one. The rest of them, I didn't need them. I didn't feel like it was necessary to keep them. I went on. So as you go through, I'm just keeping the ones that I like. And so, like this image of Jordan, I like that first pop of light, that exposure that we got, even though the background maybe isn't ideal or whatever. It's fine. I'm like, that's going to be one of my base images. I like that one. So we just go through, ignore those because we'll get to those. And so as he moved around Jordan, for example, I'm like, ooh, that's a nice edge light for her on the right. And then he gave her a little bit of hair light. Now, when Jim is absolutely right, like it really helps if you can pre-visualize what you're doing. Um, and that's one of those things, like just with experience, the more experienced you are and the more comfortable you are with seeing the image in your mind's eye, you don't have to have the whole image figured out. You just have to know, like, oh, a hair light would look really good on her on that pose, right? Oh, I need an edge light because then I can create modeling as opposed to something like this that's just kind of flat. You know, maybe I can add a little bit of highlight to her jacket. And so these are just assets that you can create as you go, and it's pretty quick, especially if you have a Dwayne who's walking around popping the flash. I didn't end up using the backlight because I wasn't crazy about it. Um, and so you can just kind of see what Dwayne did. So that's how I sort them. Once I've sorted and gone through and picked all the images that I like, you can always sort by the filter that you selected. In Lightroom, I believe it's in the lower right-hand corner. You can just select the color, and I think it will only show you that color, or vice versa. Like you can select everything but that. And then what I do is I actually delete all the ones I'm not going to keep. Obviously, I've already backed them all up, so if I screw up, I can always go back. And then I like to create folders and I actually move those images into a folder, like this one's called Composition Ready, which basically just tell me that all my images. So what I do is these are all the images for the most part that I decided that were image worthy. They were composition worthy, even down into the one that we did later at night. Yeah, you can see how dark they are. I'm sure you guys have, very similar images. And you don't have to use them all. We don't have to use everything. Okay. And then I always create like a folder called various. So like during the time that we were there, I did some portraits of, this is Jordan. Oops. There we go. Erica. So these are just individuals. We didn't do any light painting or anything like that. These were just some images that I took. So I separate those out because I don't want them to be within my images to mess me up. As you can tell, I like to organize. Like things have to be organized. My goal is to get the optimal container to put more containers in. That's what I like. So, okay. So we'll go back here. And we're going to pick our base image. So for me, because we know we were going to shoot this whole thing with the hanger, we had multiple subjects and stuff going on. I know that I want to pick my base image, and we'll just do, let's just go ahead and do Jordan, which I think.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you picked a base image that was lighter because it was earlier, and then you wanted to build on top of it with darker images, should you pick the base image as the lighter one, like earlier in the afternoon, or should you wait and pick something darker?
So I prefer, the way that I like to do it is I prefer a lighter image that gives me a basic overall foundational exposure that I can let some of that light come through. I don't like doing it the other way around where I have to constantly put in an image just to get, an image there, right? So if I'm working on black, so if I have this one where it was shot later, where the whole hanger is completely black, the lighting isn't as natural. It's not as full for the scene. I can't like blend in the wing next to Jordan, for example, if it was completely black. That wing in the background, I don't have any data, right?
Uh-huh.
So I'm always a big fan of creating an overall image or a plate that I can work from, and then I'll add highlight and shadow detail to the image, right? So when we get to like the plane, if I want to if I want to make it more dramatic in the background, I'll bring in another image that doesn't have Jordan in it, and I'll paint in the darkness. I'll paint in the contrast. I'll paint in things on the ground as
Okay.
opposed to working the other way.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that way my foundation image actually has data there. So, and it
Right.
works good for this kind of thing.
Has anyone taken Christy Elias's course?
She does several. I don't know which one.
Her this type of work where
I don't think so.
she blends images together. She starts with a dark image and then has the lighter images below it and pokes holes in the dark image to let the light through to create the style of light.
That's a really good way to say it, because that's kind of what I was thinking, but it didn't.
Christie's editing process is the exact opposite of mine.
Yeah.
Exact opposite. There's in color photography, there's subtractive and there's additive. Mine is an additive. You're describing an additive process where you start with an image that's middle of the road in terms of the histogram, and then you're adding to it to create the drama that you want.
Right. And for me, my goal is to always manage the lighting. And I like having a base image that I can bleed detail through. But it's just, how do you visualize your work? It works either way, right? Like it's kind of like how do you, everybody organizes their files differently. So it's just how your brain works, how you see your data coming through. So for me, I like this because I can see the whole image, I can see everything I want to work with, and I'm going to add elements as I go through. And I'm not super meticulously planned on when I do these kind of things. It's more of, oh, I really like this image. Now, what else can I do with Jordan? So then I'll go through and I'll look at the image. And actually, what I'll do, let me go back because I actually brought an image in. I wasn't ready. Okay.
When starting a project like this, you may actually want to shoot an image where you have clear exposure, whether it's a great exposure or not, all the way through. Because there might be something in that hangar that you noticed the night you were there, but when you get home or you start working on this 2 days, a week later, or in this case, 2 weeks after the fact, you're not going to remember what was in that hangar. You're not going to remember that there was a toy airplane or that Barry was sitting in his chair underneath one of the aircraft. So it gives you a good reminder of things that caught your attention that you're going to want to emphasize when you do get to work on it.
Right. And the other thing is too is I like to tone my images. I like to color grade my images. So all the images that I bring in here are going to be color graded, and they're all going to use this particular style that I've created. So every single image that I bring in, for the most part, is going to have that style already applied. I'm not a big fan of bringing them in blank and then toning them later. I don't think color grading works really well on images within Photoshop. They work better on raw files. I like how it looks better tonal control, things like that. So again, it's entirely up to you. So, all right. So here's our first image. And I'm going to bring this into, hang on, did I cancel my preset? I did. Okay, there we go. We're going to keep that guy. All right. So I'm going to bring this into Photoshop. And so this is my first image. All right. So now I'm going to go back into Capture One and I'm going to look for something else. Okay. So I like that one. So let's reset.
Right. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So when I shot all those pictures that day, I shot them on JPEG, not RAW. So you suggest this should have been in RAW, right?
If you ever take a photograph of something you want to keep, you should always use RAW.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. But you have JPEG, you can still work with them. There's no reason you can't work with them. So you can still do it. You're going to have limited latitude for recovering highlights and shadows, but you still can do all of this stuff. Yeah, so it'll work
Okay.
just fine. Yeah.
But that's a good reason to have lots of pictures, so you can
Yeah.
pick the one you want.
So now I'm going to bring this file in because what I've decided is I from this image to this image, like I like the light that Dwayne is adding, like that contrast light. Like I like that. So I'm gonna use some of that. So I'm simply just gonna bring that image in. Now, when you get this image into Photoshop, you want to go to your selection tool, which is the 4 arrows, and then you're going to click and drag your image over to the original tab, wait for it to highlight, hover back over your image and hold down Shift. Because when you hold down Shift, it centers the image. So now you can see that we've added that image and you can't tell. Like there's no deregistration, everything is registered perfectly. So I'm turning the layer on and off because I want to be able to see that. Let's duplicate our base layer with Command J. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a layer mask on this. Now, if you just click the layer mask tool at the bottom, it gives you a white layer mask, which I don't prefer to do. On the Mac, I think it's Option. Is it Option? Yeah, Option gives you a black layer mask, which means this layer no longer shows through, right? So what I want to do is the layer, yeah. There we go. Did I have 2 of the same image? It looks like I have 2 of the same images, don't I? Hang on. I think what I did was when I was bouncing around, I brought in the wrong image. I did bring in the wrong image. Why didn't Dwayne tell me? Okay, let's do this one.
Sorry, Troy, I couldn't find the unmute button to let you know in time.
And I will tell you that it's way different to just sit here listening to your music and just edit away to have to describe all your steps and not get lost. All right, let me get rid of. There we go. All right. So, and you'll notice what I'm going to do too is I bring in new images. I'm going to delete the previous tab because I like to keep my workspace clear. So anyway, so we're going to bring this one, drag it into my first tab, hover over the image, hold down Shift and let go. And now we can see a little bit of the body change, but everything else is the same. All right. Then when you're shooting models, it's a lot more difficult than when you're shooting objects because the models breathe and move and do all that kind of stuff. So I have to be careful whether or not I can actually use some of that data with her. So she may have moved too much. Let's just see. Yeah, I think she moved too much. So I can't use that. So there's an image that we can't use. So I'm going to delete it. We'll go back to capture one and we'll just go through here again. Say, oh, let's see if we can throw some hair light in there. Let me do that. Now, I'll be fair, I did not demo this image before we got on this class, so I may not be able to make this particular light work for her. So we'll see. If not, then you can see what happens when we have to work around it. All right, let's bring that in. Back into Photoshop. That first image we're going to get rid of because it doesn't have anything I want. Second one. There we go. Let's see what she did. Did she move? No, I think we're good. Okay. So I want that highlight on her hair and on the jacket. So let's see. Now this is going to be really tough because I don't think it's going to line up, to be completely honest. So Option, mask. And then you're going to go to your brush, which is a quick way to do this. If you hit B for brush, D for default, which changes your black and white, and then X, which is your black and white tool, and make sure that your brush mode that you're in is normal, not soft light. And I like to work at a low opacity and a low flow, basically like 40, 50, because I want to be able to paint things in. But in this case, let's just.
Does your technique for bringing in that layer, is that the same as auto align?
No, actually, that's a good question. So what Jim is referring to is there's a way to bring an image in to auto align, which means if your images are out of register, Photoshop will auto align that for you. because these are all registered because the tripod never moved, I don't need to use auto align. So
What technique you use to bring it as auto align?
once you have the layers in here, I haven't done this in a long time. I think you do you know where it is, Dwayne? Auto align? Oh, here it is. So you would bring in an image. Let me go back. Get rid of this. Okay. And hang on, because I just broke it. Let me start over. You gotta go back and get that image again. Okay, get it back in the Photoshop. Okay, here we go. So that's, oh, that was the same. Yeah. All right. So to use auto align, what you would do is you would just drag the image in and drop it right on your working palette, right? Like you could have multiple images. And what you want to do is you kind of want to get them kind of close, and then you want to select them like command select. So I'm selecting these two layers, layer 1 and background, and then go to image or edit, auto align layers. And what it's going to do is it's going to look at data in the images and it's going to try to line them up for us. So let's see how that did. Yeah. So it did that for us already. So if you have an image in the sequence where maybe you bumped your tripod, or the guy standing next to you, which I think I did that to somebody. I think I did that to John Paul or David. If you bump their tripod, this can really help, and it'll also distort the image slightly to make it align. You do need a lot of data in there in order to do that, meaning that it can't be something with a lot of soft data, soft tones and things.
I was just asking if the technique you were showing was incorporated it, but can you
Yeah,
explain that technique of how you bring them in again?
yeah, definitely. So when you drag and drop an image inside of another tab, okay, like if I just drag this over, hover over that first tab, and then you want to bring your mouse, because technically I'm still holding the image, right? And then if I let go, it's just going to drop it randomly wherever. If you go back, and the same thing applies if you do like a layer selection. So I'll duplicate that layer. Let's just do like a layer selection of her. Do Command J. So now I only have the selection of her. Okay. So if I use the move tool and I grab that and I bring it over there and I just let go, it just goes wherever it wants to go. If I grab it and hold down the shift key, oops, what did I do? I think I made a mess. Hang on, let me get rid of these. Okay. Let's get rid of that. All right, so if I select her and I drag it and drop it over there, okay, don't disappoint me. Hold down the shift key. It's not doing it. Maybe it doesn't do it with the selections. It's trying to be fancy. Command D, deselect. So now I'm selecting that image. So this is what I had showed you, Jim. I was trying to be fancy, but apparently I shouldn't try to be fancy. Hold down the shift key when you let go. It registers that image inside the frame the same way. It's supposed to center. I don't know why the selection's not doing it, but you know how Adobe sometimes it just changed things. Like, I don't know.
All the time.
All the time. That's so frustrating. Okay. So what I want is I just want the highlight from her hair. And what's a good technique to do is to turn the layer on and off to kind of see how much she's moved. I'm afraid she's moved too much. And this would be a good example of what may or may not work. Because those darn models. So we're going to hold down the Option key. We're going to create a new layer mask. We want the black layer mask. And remember, we want to do B for brush, D for default, which means if any of these color selections down here are other than black and white, it'll change it to black and white. And then you want to use the X key to switch, which is basically paint in, paint out. Okay. And you want to make sure your brush is normal. So for this example, I just set the brush to a high opacity so that we can kind of see what we just did. I go to black. I can paint it back out. So is anybody not familiar with layer masks and how layer masks work and how to make them work for you? Is anybody unfamiliar with that? Okay, good. So what I'm going to do is I want to paint in highlight, right? I want some of these highlights. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to just paint them in really sharp. We want to bring them in subtly. So let's bring our opacity way down, our maximum opacity, bring our flow down. So what I'm going to do is make my brush smaller. I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to paint some of the highlights within her hair because I don't want to bleed everywhere else. I just want just those highlights. And that looks nice. That's it. So out of all that, that's all I want. And you can name your layer. So, so let's just do highlights. I'm sure I'm spelled that wrong. So cool. Hair's done. Let's go back. Let's get some more pieces. So what else can we get? What else did Dwayne do? Let's see. Let's see if we can use that. See if we can use that highlight. And I remember I did this effect. And I'll adjust the exposure. Okay, I like that. So we'll bring that back into Photoshop. So, and I'm also making sure that I bring everything in as a TIFF, uncompressed 16-bit, and Adobe RGB. Because once you bring an image into Photoshop, it's no longer raw. And even if it's a smart object, it's not raw. And you want to have as much latitude in, in Photoshop as possible when you're working on those images. So I don't need this layer anymore because everything is here, right? Oh, did I do that on the wrong image? No, I didn't. No, there we go. So I don't need that first image. So here's my second image. So I'm going to grab the move tool, drop it in there, hold down the shift key. So we're good. So let's turn that layer on and off, see what happened. Yeah. Now notice we have all this extra light in the background now because I did make it a little bit brighter. So I'm going to go to BDX, make sure I'm on normal. And sometimes I will just paint to see what data, what kind of details I have. Like, do I like how that looks? Do I not like how that looks? Yeah. See, we're getting some spill over here because the image is brighter. So I'm going to bring up this foreground a little bit. Now, because this image, you could shift. Yep, turn off the mask. Because the image that I'm layering over the top of it, I opened up the exposure a little bit in RAW. That means I have some things that I can do with this image now. Like notice the airplane in the back. I can bring some detail in there. So I can actually go through and I can open up the airplane a little bit. This airplane could use a little bit of love. So I'm going to bring up the highlights in there. Maybe a little bit along the wing. And so you really just want to be intentional about what you're doing. Think about the important parts. Don't just brush because otherwise you'll just make a mess. So like the car, for example, and we'll get to more details on the car, but like I just want to bring up the chrome, right? So if I do this, if I turn that off, oh, the light didn't reach all the way over there. We do have some nice light on this front fender though. So what I'll do is I like that extra light on that front fender, so I'll keep that. I might take the light for the headlights just because the image was brighter. Yep. We already opened up the hanger in the back. I like that. And we open up the plane. See how dark it is? And so what I want to do is I want to focus on the areas that are lighter in the plane, like the paint, the windows, the reflections, because that's going to give me a better sense of depth. The shadows already look good. I like the dark shadows, but I might bring up some of the highlights. So, we're just essentially building layers in our image as we go, right? And we're done with that layer. Anybody have any questions yet? Okay. I can't eat a candy if you guys don't ask a question because I have to keep talking. Hang on, let me
So I have a question real quick.
Sure.
All right. So Capture One and its AI masking features, do you use those at all to isolate the different objects in the scene and paint on them individually without spilling onto other objects?
Um, you absolutely can, and I haven't done that. So what Frederick is referring to is both Lightroom and Capture One both have really good masking technology. So for example, you can use that when you want to bring images into, so like the car here, for example. So let me apply this effect. Okay. Now, I tend to think that Capture One is far superior at doing AI selection than is Lightroom. So now we've selected the car. And I'm going to create a new mask, add a new empty layer. Yes, and we're going to fill that from mask 1. And then we're going to invert it. Okay. So now I can turn that background down. I can reduce the contrast. I can do a lot of that. And now we can bring this into Photoshop so that we're not going to get as much contamination from the other areas. So I'll select that, bring it into my master working file, hold down the Shift key, drop it in there. Now, you can get really clever where you could come in here and you could do lighten if you want. And the only thing that's going to affect is the car, because that's basically layer masking. So you didn't even have to paint that in. You could just drop it in, say lighten, the rest of the scene is completely unaffected. And then if you wanted to, you can apply a traditional layer mask. Remember, brush, default, and then I want black. So I want to create some more depth in the car. So what I might do is I might just paint some of those shadows back in on the back of the car, like maybe where the light would fall off, maybe some of these areas. Because I want to create some depth in the image, right? So I don't want it quite that dark, but I don't want it as bright as it was. I want to create some shadow and some depth. So it doesn't look like it's flat light. It doesn't look like Dwayne was standing over there with a strobe, which he was. Now, to be fair, and Jim is a master at this, but if you really know what you want to do and you know that you want a reflection off the hood or you want to edge light the car and you want to get that reflection off the fenders and things, like you have to put that light in there in the right place. We were not that sophisticated in doing this. We were just trying to build. So there you go. So now we're getting a little bit of a light in there. Now, the one thing that I would strongly suggest, okay, is that if you look at this image, I don't know if you guys can actually see it real well. So here's what I'll do. So you see I painted some of the darker image in the back of the car. Okay. But when I bring this in and I want to bring shadows in over this car, it kind of muddies the color up a little bit, which I'm not a huge fan of. So what you might want to do is think, well, okay, I like that. Let's do that in the raw. And this is where working in raw is a real benefit to you. So I'm going to create a new layer mask. And I'm going to grab my paintbrush. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint where we have the back of the car. And I'm going to kind of like just blend it a little bit. Okay. And now I'm going to bring down like maybe the exposure. Nope, that's too much. It muddies a little bit. The brightness is nice. And if I want, I can actually warm that up a tiny bit. And then that looks a lot more natural because we're working with the tonal range and the color grading and the tones that are in a raw file as opposed to what you get when you're in Photoshop. That makes sense? That well, I'm getting like off of the light painting techniques and talking Photoshop-y stuff, but so let's see if we can see a big difference.
Right?
Yes.
So if you don't have Capture One, can you do that in Lightroom and then bring it in after you've whittled with it on the sliders?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's real important to know that all of this stuff works in Photoshop and in Lightroom. I'm sorry, in Capture One and in Lightroom, Photoshop Camera Raw, on one Camera Raw, like whatever you're using, the techniques are there for you to be able to do that.
Right.
Oh, I could take that layer and open it up as a filter in Camera Raw, which is what I do a lot in Photoshop. Is I take a layer and then I just go to Camera Raw and then twiddle it again and then
Yes,
okay.
Except, and what and Annette, tell me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is that you're going to look at this image and you're like, oh, okay, let me get rid of this. Let me just mask that out. Okay, so what you're saying, Annette, is that you would go into filter and you go to Camera Raw.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, I did it on the wrong one.
Yeah, not on the mask.
There we go. The problem is when you do it here, you're not working with the raw file anymore. You're only working with a TIFF, which is only 16-bit, and it's not raw. So you're going to have some of the same issues where when you try to bring that image down, your tones are going to muddy, your shadows are going to block. It's not the same.
Okay.
Yeah, it's better to work from raw. Now, if you do a smart object and you go in and you double click on the smart object, it will open Camera Raw, edit the raw, and then bring it back into your smart layer, into your smart object, which is
So
we're not going to
just turn that layer into a smart object instead and then go to Camera Raw.
No, because if you turn the layer into a smart object, it's still a TIFF. So what you have to do is, and you can't do it from Capture One, but you can definitely do it from Lightroom, is that you want to open the file into Photoshop as a smart object. So
Gotcha.
and what's confusing is Adobe uses the same term. So if I want to convert one of these into a smart object, it's not the same as opening it from Lightroom. So when you open it from Lightroom, Lightroom references the raw file for the data that you're seeing. So when you re-edit the raw file, which is exactly what you want to do, it shows you those edits in the TIFF. But if you convert a TIFF to to a smart object, it's still a TIFF and didn't gain any of that data back. So
Okay, that makes sense.
yeah. Jim, I think I heard you had something you want to add?
I was just gonna say, we don't use Lightroom. We only use Raw Editor or Photoshop. That's it. So
Yeah, so Camera Raw is the same as Lightroom. It just doesn't have the database behind it. It's the same editor. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's the same horsepower. Yeah.
So my question, when you do it in Lightroom, if the image is in RAW, it would treat and do everything to a raw image before you bring it to to Photoshop, right?
Yeah, so the ideal workflow for any photo editing, right? So any photo editing, and I'm going to say this as a blanket rule for everyone. Do as much of your corrections in the raw, because technically a raw file doesn't have a bit depth. It has way more data than we can even see, than our monitors can show us. The color space is bigger than Adobe RGB. It's bigger. So when you tweak a slider or you make an adjustment, you're working with data way outside what we can see on the monitor. The moment you bring it into Photoshop, you've thrown away 60% of the data that that file contains, and you can't get it back. So it's important to work in the raw and the widest with the most data your file has, the most color range, the most tonal range, you know, all those kind of things. So yes, raw, the very last steps that you do is you bring it into Photoshop. Try to sharpen in raw, crop in raw, resize from raw, color correction in raw, everything you can. Okay, where was I? All right, let's go back here. But that's a good idea, Frederick. I never thought of masking and doing all that. Okay. So now we're kind of done with Jordan being in the shot. I want to go back, and now we started to light the airplane. So I like that one right there. And this is, again, this is one of the simplest ways to do this. You build your system out however complicated you want it to be. But to me, this is how I like to work. I got my base image. I got all my extra images I'm going to work with. I'm like, yeah, I want to throw some light on that airplane. Let's do that. So now I'll grab that. These other images I can delete because we don't need those. Command S. I'm going to make sure I save that one. I love Dwayne's little shadows keeps disappearing. He keeps getting thinner and thinner over here.
Just like my life, it's fading away.
It's fading. Yeah. All right. So now I want this image. Hold down Shift key. There it is. Now, to Annette's question early on into what Jim said about how Christie Alliance works, you could have started with this image if you wanted to. Whatever works best for you. It's the same technique. You paint things in or you paint things out. That's really what's going to matter. Okay, we don't need this layer, so let me get rid of that layer. And keep in mind too, these files get freaking big. I mean, a simple image that I'm working on, we'll show you. I'll get to that one in a little bit. It's 4.5 gigs, which means you have to save it in a special Photoshop format. So there's ways that you can work around that. You could build your base. Like this would be a good example. Like we could have built our base with the image, the car, the foreground, drop the sky in, save that as a working file with all the layers, and then export it as a flattened TIFF, and then put that in, and then added our subjects. You know what I mean? And then you could do that in layers, so you're not working with such huge files, which can really slow your system down if that ever becomes an issue. So we're going to mask this. And I guess we're not really going to bring up much in that car, but let's see what we can do. So brush default X, we want to paint white, everything's flat. Let's bring the opacity up. Oh, you can see it actually darkened the dark colors on the plane a little bit. Oh, I don't hate that. Cool. So I'm going to show you guys a Photoshop trick. I don't know if you all know how to do this, but let's say that I'm looking at that light that I just painted in there. And I say, I want just this layer to be brighter. Like, darn, I wish it had been brighter, right? So you can go down here and you can do a curves layer. So I can do a curves. And I'll grab a curve and I'll bring that up. You're like, oh, that's the whole image. So if you hold down the Shift key and you hover, is it the Shift key? Nope. Nope. It's the Option key on the Mac. If you hover over the line in between the adjustment layer, which is the curves, and the layer below it, you see that little arrow? If I click, now that adjustment will only affect the layer directly below it. So this is only going to affect that little layer mask, which is nice, because if you need to make adjustments to that after you've layered it, you can still do that. it's a very clever way to fix things. So I hope none of you knew that. I don't think that's the case. Looking at Jim smiling, he's like, amateur hour, Troy, amateur
I
hour.
think, no, I think you just made a clipping mask.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm trying to keep it, try to keep it light, but yeah, it's a clipping mask.
Yeah, that's a great
And you can
idea.
do more. You can do more if you want to. So
I use
let's see
those
if we
all
have
the
anything
time.
else. Oh, let's add so here's kind of a fun thing too, right? So see Erica. So I could add Erica to this image if we wanted to, right? Because I could just bring this image in. I'm going to drag over to my main layer. Drop it in there. We're going to do a layer mask. Brush. And let's, oops, I went too many X's. Making sure. Now this is where, when I'm judging image competition, and I know that Dwayne and Jim, we do the same thing, because we spend a lot of time in Photoshop. This is where you got to be really careful about how you mask this in, because if you do something like that and you don't blend it properly, we're gonna know. Everybody's gonna know. Or if you do the opposite, somebody's got no feet. Um, this is easier to do than you think, though. So when you're blending your stuff and you want to make sure that your layers are working, just simply go up to the layer palette and turn the eye on and off. That's it. Just look at it and see what am I affecting? Like up at the top around the door. I don't like that. I don't want that to be affected. So I'm gonna paint. I'm gonna get rid of you. I don't like that. On the cockpit or the side of the plane right here, you see there's a little bit of a shadow right there. Watch when I turn this on and off. See that little shadow? That shadow was created by Erica. I don't like that. So I'm gonna erase that shadow. I'm gonna blend it in. So turning things on and off is often really, really important to do. And if you want to hide a transition, like in this, like with the shadow thing, for example, what am I on? Okay, here we go. So that's definitely too much, right? But if I paint it, I don't feel like I like the way that light is working. So what you want to do is you can turn your flow way down and you can just lightly brush it in. What you've done is you created this transition, which fools your eye, not really fools your eye, but then your eye isn't drawn to it because it's a subtle change as opposed to a dramatic change. Now, the same thing like with her feet. Oops, I did that backwards. So what I would do here for her feet is I would bring her feet in and then I would go in close. I like to turn my flow down so I can blend things in. And I would get close and I would just work those out. And see this area right here, I can bring that back. And don't forget like all the little hidden spots. I think her boots are a little too bright. So I'll bring that down. That looks terrible. I'm going to undo that. Maybe it's not terrible. We'll see how it works. Okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to turn that layer on and off to be like, well, there's still some weirdness going on in there, right? Like, how do we want to blend that better? So what do I want to do? I want to make this darker. Yep. I'm just doing it lightly, but it erased her. So you got to go in nice and small. And I think like Dwayne said earlier, the more that you do this, the more you get familiar with Photoshop, the faster this stuff becomes. So realistically, it's pretty quick. There we go. I'll just hide those. Yeah, that's getting better. Now, an interesting, well, a Photoshop technique that I use a lot, that I'll show you. So if you turn this layer on and off, you'll notice that I don't have my illustration tool. Anyway, in this area right here to the right of her feet, there's like a light area and then it gets dark around her. Now, I could take some time and try to blend all that in the layer mask, which is fine. But I actually like the shadow. Let me go back. How far? Okay. But I just want to fill that little hole. So what you can do is you do the claw, which is Command Option Shift E, and you do that on the top layer. What is that called? How do you do that?
It's hidden now. And it's
Oh, is
called
it hidden?
it's hidden now and it's called a stamp layer and it's one of their historic things where it's like Save for Web is now hidden as well.
Jeez. Okay. But you want to get that image there. Shift Command Option E works perfect. So just remember that. And so now what I have is I actually have a photo layer, a flattened photo layer that's flattened from all the previous layers. So, which means I could essentially turn all these off and it doesn't affect anything. So be careful of that. So what I want to do is I want to bring this dark area into this light area. And so what we're going to do is we're simply going to use a darken mode on our brush. Flow, you can leave the opacity at 100 so that as you layer it, it'll come up. And I'm just going to select and I'm just going to paint that dark in that's next to it. So you can blend those areas real nice. Right? I think I grabbed some of that line. So that's a great way to, let me go back here. There you go. Just to kind of darken. And you can pull that from anything that has a similar texture. Kind of blend in around there. Blending is the key. So let's add Barry. So how are we doing so far? How you guys doing? Questions? You love it? You hate it? You never want to do it again?
Starting to make sense.
Where's Barry? Oh, there he is. So which one did I like? I think I like this one. So tone it. Yeah, but I'm looking at the area that Barry's in because I'm going to decide how much of that I want to bring in because I know that the hanger is already dark. So essentially, like if you don't know Photoshop super well, but even if you do, you can see that we're really only using a couple tools. We're just using light and dark, and we're using blend modes. That's it. We're not even getting into like fancy stuff. All right, Cheryl. Thank you for hanging out.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go. So here's our original. Okay. And then what we want to do is we're going to bring in that area back there in the back. I'm still frustrated that this doesn't work. I'm going to try this again. Command J. This used to work.
You have to grab the layer and grab the layer and bring it over and holding shift.
Yeah. No, you shouldn't have to. No, it's not aligning. It used to align. All right.
Grab
You
the
have to
whole layer and do
hold
it.
don't you have to hold control down when you drop it?
Shift.
Yeah, shift to put it in the center.
It doesn't do it. It does it if you do the whole image, but it won't do it if you do a selection. See, the whole image works perfect, but not when I've cut a section out. And I used to use that all the time because I used to use that when I dropped in skies and stuff.
When I looked up stamp layer, it's no longer in the menu. It's just shortcut only.
Seriously, that's a bummer.
Yep.
'Cause I live by that. Like that's an option I use all the time. Adobe's going to take that away too. Okay. So what I did is I dropped that layer in. I put in a black mask, right? So because all I want to do is I just want to bring Barry in. Now here again, this is one of those kind of things where you got to be really careful how you blend this because you want to make sure that he's not transparent. So I'm going to turn the flow up all the way, brush default X, make sure I'm on white, normal, and bring him in. And that looks pretty cool. So I I like to paint kind of beyond where I need to be to see if I'm going to be able what I'm going to be able to use and basically where am I going to paint it back so that it blends properly. So like all around the back of the plane, if I switch it and I go back to in the darkness, so I've got I'm going to create the mask and I'm just going to blend that in. And there was something, yeah, right here. I want that. So I'll blend that in. The ground. So I'm just bringing the dark of the space back in. The front of the plane is a little too dark, so I can burn that down just a bit.
The hood ornament on the car as well.
Do we want to bring it out or take it back? So you guys see all this stuff that I don't see when I'm looking at the stuff that I see.
The ground under his feet is dark.
Yeah, so some of it, let's see what has changed. Let's go the other way. There we go. I like that little reflection in there. Yep. So that looks pretty cool. Now this is where during the time that we were shooting, if you remember, Dwayne was running through and he was popping light inside, the hangar at all kinds of different locations. So if you wanted to, we could take this image or that image or that image and just paint in whatever we wanted into the hangar. So like if I did, that's the color tone. Bring that in. Yelling at me. Hmm. Oh, I know. I use it's called a Shuttle Pro, and it's got like 15 buttons on it and a dial. So it was originally made for like video editing, but I set it for Zoom. I've got it set so I can grab all my tools. And if I'm not paying attention, sometimes I click too soon. Okay, we don't need to save that. Okay. So if we just want to bring some detail in the background, we're going to do that same thing. And we've done this a bunch now, so you guys got this. There we go. Layer mask. Brush default. Make sure I'm going to paint white. There we go. We can add some light in the background. Ooh, but see what I did on her? She's transparent.
She's missing part of her arm. Did you do that on purpose?
No, I'm undoing it.
It was there before, though. The other plane was over her arm.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. See, in my haste to demo, at some point, I think I painted that. I don't know where that happened. So let's see if we can find it. Uh,
That
oh,
one.
right there. It was that one. So if you do this and you want to fix it, it can be kind of a pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix the mask.
She has two hands, also.
Yeah, because this is the you guys aren't supposed to catch all that.
Sorry.
Oh no, I screwed up.
Is this AI?
Clear,
It could be.
clearly
Oh, look
AI.
at it's all the way back here. Oh, that stinks so much. See, do as I say, not as I do.
See, when you master this technique, you can earn a lot of money.
Well, remember I said make sure you turn your layers on and off so you don't screw it up like I just did.
I missed some of the beginning stuff you were talking about. Like, what's your finished image going to look like? Is it going to be a nighttime image?
No, the finished image is very much it looks like this. I mean, it's daylight. I added a sky. So
Minus
it's just
one.
really I'm really just trying to get everybody to kind of feel comfortable with the technique of how do you go and you shoot a couple hundred images that have various exposures, various compositions, and the techniques that you would use to put them together. Because aside from understanding how Photoshop works, it's quite daunting to manage all those images and how to bring them in one at a time and how to layer them into your shots. And obviously how you screw up a shot where you're not paying attention.
How long were you guys there doing the actual photo shoot?
How long were we there, Dwayne? Like 2 hours, 3 hours?
We started shooting, and to build this one layer, we probably shot for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
We were there probably 4 hours in total.
Yeah, we were there a long time. And part of it was just because we had so many people shooting at the same time.
Were you doing a workshop?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
To do this on an educational basis, I would probably, and this is how I started some of it, is I started photographing a car in my driveway. So it was one subject with different levels of light, and then I just painted in different parts of the car.
Yep.
Trying to do this at this location as an education. We begin with looking at our foreground, middle ground, background. Then we start throwing people in, and we have a lot of things going on in this particular photograph.
Yeah, so this might be the edit that I would finish without any people in it. And it's not perfect. I did this one quick, but you drop the sky in after the fact, but we built all these layers. There's like 9 or 10 images in here. So
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah,
Is the sky a sky that you took from your photograph?
Yeah, so all of the skies that I drop in skies pretty regularly, and they're all skies that I own that I've taken. So, or to be fair, there might be skies that I've traded with friends of mine because we have a cloud bank where we share skies for some of our stuff. But yeah,
Given the weather that day, that's actually perfect sky.
yeah, it turned out pretty good. So once you create like what we've done here is you can see like some of these images, they really didn't change that much because once I built the base image with Jordan, I wasn't Jordan, I did the base image, I think with Elliot. Then you can add Erica, then you can add, them walking, then you can add, Erica by herself next to the plane. It's not that one. Um, yeah, there you go. And you can just change the tones in the image because you have those layers, like those layers are already there. So let's see what I did. So let me get back to Photoshop. So aside from all my mistakes that you guys now know what not to do, is there anything that you would like me to show you? Removing something with generative fill or adding a sky or what would you guys like?
How'd you get rid of the cars over?
I was going to ask the same question. The cars behind the red car.
Dwayne's shadow.
So Dwayne's shadow would come from another layer. So what I would do is I would grab a layer like this one or one of the previous ones, and I would just layer that in there to get rid of him. There were some times when he was lighting something and he had interfered with the door, like the door opening. So I had to do the same techniques. I'll show you what I did on the car. So to make this one simple, let me just flatten the whole image. We'll do another layer. So we'll duplicate that layer with just Command J. And so I would do generative fill. So what you're going to do is you're just going to select your image, and then you get your generative dialog box, which doesn't want to move. There you go. And right now, you know, every time I use this, it's different. But right now, what I do is I just use nothing. I don't put anything in there. I leave it blank and I just hit generate. And for the most part, it does a pretty good job eliminating it.
And
But
it's
you're
fine
going
to
to,
do that for competitions.
you are not allowed to do that for competitions.
Yeah.
Yeah, because technically these pixels are not pixels. So you didn't create this. These aren't your pixels, right? These are generated. So that's what I would do. And then I would come back in and I would do create a new working layer, and I would clean that up. Oop, I made a mess. And I would clean up little things and see what I like and make sure there's no weird repeating things. Get rid of some dust spots. And then I would try to get rid of the car. I don't know why Margie had to park her Tesla right there. Yeah, so we don't have an option in our image competitions that allows for AI like this. There's an open category, which you could do a lot of Photoshop work or you can do digital artistry, but allowing AI to do the work for you is not allowed. So there you can see. Now, sometimes it'll change the car. Oh, this time I didn't change the car at all. The last time I did this, Annette, it changed the whole back of this car and it deformed the
Oh, you're
fender.
marching
And
on the car. I thought, ooh, it's gonna take a chunk out of that.
Or you could probably scroll through the 3 choices that it gives you.
no, I'm looking at them. They're actually, oops, I gotta turn it on. They're actually pretty good. It barely, yeah, it barely changed it at all. So that's how I would get rid of the car. You know, and I do that stuff for clients all the time. Like I have no problem using, you know, AI for that generative fill. The the real challenge with using this is it doesn't match the texture. So we don't have any grain in here. But if you have an image that has a lot of grain, maybe it was just shot high ISO kind of thing, and then when you do generative fill, the AI makes it smooth, and the grain patterns don't match. And I
Huh.
just judged an image competition for one of the affiliates, and I saw that a lot. And that same thing can happen even if you're just doing regular cloning because it blurs the pixels. The grain, I shouldn't say, it doesn't blur the pixels, it blurs the grain. So you have to be really careful with all that.
I usually just go back in and add noise.
Right. Right. Which can be a whole workshop just in and of itself on how to properly add noise and make it blend and yeah.
Can you actually tell if it was AI or clone tool?
I I don't think so. I mean, if it's done in AI, it's almost always a sharp edge where the difference changes, you know, like in this method where I've selected Dwayne, like usually you can see that sharp edge, but I don't think you can definitively say like it's not super obvious. And
Not
I know
visible,
that
but
it,
Photoshop stamps it in the metadata that it's been used AI.
right, and that's what I was going to say is that the only way that you're going to get caught is if you get called out. If somebody says, "Hey, um, you know, there was too much Photoshop work in that image to be in that particular category, or it doesn't look right," submit your raw file, and then you know we should be able to see. I don't I don't know if the JPEGs that we're receiving have that data in there.
It's you can actually strip out the data with a JPEG. In Orange County, there are several categories now that we actually require the raw file at the time of upload.
Right. right? Because it's getting to be one of those techniques like where if you've been around in the affiliates and competition long enough, like when Photoshop was becoming more and more prevalent and easier for everybody to use, sky replacements and things like that were huge. You see a wedding image and it's on a golf course and you've got this beautiful stormy sky in the background. That's not normally Southern California, So even before AI, those type of things were becoming an issue.
Darlene, we're
Can you,
talking about the affiliates generally tonight, probably more so Inland Empire, Orange County.
Okay, see, I'm in Canada, so I'm oblivious to all this. But Kappa in Canada has also got similar rules that you can't use AI of any kind, including generative fill. And then it came up recently where this was in a group I was in where they were talking about just if you use the crop tool, it fills with generative AI. Or I went to go expand my canvas and it automatically uses fill
Mhm.
with AI, and you have to like kind of counteract that to say no, I don't want that. Like if I just want to extend my canvas because I want a transparent background or something, it fills it automatically.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the real challenge. And for us, the affiliates, and you asked in the chat which competitions, we're a PPA affiliate, so so we basically adopt any of the PPA standards for the most part, some of their categories, and then state and local. So we're a local affiliate. So we do strive to move our members up through the state and into national competitions being PPA. So,
As Troy was
but
saying,
as you've mentioned, Darlene, the challenges with AI are how do we define them and where do we draw the line? Because if you just use, Topaz gigapixel to upres an image, you're using AI. If you use content aware fill, you're using a form of machine learning, which is basically AI. So we're trying to be gracious in what you can use. What I think we're trying to endeavor to do is that we want you to do the work and then we want that to be your pixels. Don't use generative AI to drop in a stream that didn't exist, or like take out those cars where it doesn't require any of your own Photoshop skills to build that when you go with like digital artistry, which you're judged on your Photoshop skills, you know.
and
So
with the case of Orange County, we put a big emphasis that our photo competition is more educational than it is competition. And with that premise, we expect to be able to teach our users what they don't know so they can get the most out of their educational money spent.
yep. Yep. So it'll be fun, Darlene, if you come and join Frederick because he likes to poke the bear a lot, and we tend to talk about AI a lot. It's a lot of AI conversation around, what is good, what is bad, how do we use it, why do we hate it, what is it stealing our jobs? I mean, like we cover all the topics, and it's still so fresh. It's hard to wrap our
Darlene,
heads around.
Darlene, I love that post, but I can only read the first 32 pages. My God, that's crazy.
Oh, which no, I just copied and pasted the it's just from the Kappa website. So it says editing techniques not permitted, and then artificial intelligence renderings, images that have been created or modified using AI in painting, where AI fills in the generative elements not captured by the photographers, or out painting. Basically, it's saying none of these things are permitted. Yeah.
Yeah, that's rough. Then you can't. I mean, technically, you can't even use like content aware fill or the Band-Aid tool. Well, I guess the Band-Aid tool it's grabbing content
Content
from
aware you
elsewhere.
can, because technically
Right.
it's they consider AI generative anything that's going to the cloud. I think that's generative, because content aware fill is using content of the actual image
Right.
that's already there, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a great conversation. I one of the things that I'm really happy about is that we're talking about it. So even if you look at this stuff and you think to yourself, like, look, I don't use AI, I'm not interested in AI, I'm not gonna worry about it, but it's gonna affect you anyway. And so for those of us that are, professional photographers full time, like this is dramatically affecting our business, and we don't have proper dialogue to talk about what is an illustration versus an AI image versus something that somebody did the Photoshop work on. Like who gets the credit, the human or the machine? And there's dialogue that we just don't have to make it easy to understand. We call everything an image or a photograph, and that's no longer the case anymore. So it's pretty challenging, but in the context of like our light painting, um, if it's for you, if it's for your clients, I mean, learn it. Learn generative fill. Learn how to use those things. It's so powerful. Um, I photograph at a local park, and this local park is full of humans and trash cans and parking lots and things that I don't want to see. I use generative fill constantly to help clean stuff up. So, and it's great. It saves me so much time. I don't have the Photoshop skills that like Dennis Dunbar has to go in there and build these images. Like I have AI. So
Renee, Robin.
yeah, yeah, Renee and Christy and like there's a lot of them. So so basically, I mean, I'm happy to keep chatting about this stuff. I don't want anybody that wants to know more about light painting and compositing this stuff to miss out. I'm pretty much done with the demo. The demo was pretty simple. You could sit and watch me edit for hours. This kind of stuff just takes time to get in there and finesse it. I suggest that you go create some of your own, exercise these things, and see what happens. And if you want to come back and revisit this kind of topic, all you got to do is just ping me or any one of us, and we're happy to spin up another Zoom call and just, do this. So, does anybody have any questions about the light painting?
Cheryl asked about dropping the sky in.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Would you be okay doing a quick demo about dumping in the sky?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm sorry to say it's not very hard and it's not very exciting, but let's do it.
So that means it'll only take 45 minutes, Troy.
So I've tried it a couple of times, and when there's simple lines, it works pretty well. But when there's, trees or more finer detail, that's where I tend to stumble.
Yeah, so okay, so let's just do and I think I can probably find you another image. So let me get rid of these layers because we don't really need those. So this is a simple sky, right? This is pretty simple.
Troy, you
So
might want to
Can
share.
you share the screen?
oh, I'm not sharing. Sorry. I forgot.
Troy, glad you could see it's a simple sky.
Yay, here we go. All right. Thanks, guys. So yeah, this is fairly simple and we have a lot of straight lines, so this is actually pretty easy. And then what I'll do is I'll find another image and I'll show you what I do for something that's complicated or has things. So there's two ways to do this. You can go to selection and you can tell it to select sky, and then you can bring in and drag your own images in there. I'm not going to go into that because I don't even think that's a good way to do it. I think the best way to do that is if you go over to edit and do sky replacement. I think it does a better job blending and it does a better job selecting. Okay. So when you hit sky replacement, it automatically brings up this panel and it grabs an image for you. Now you don't have all these images. You can add these images on your own. So if you have a folder, you can come down here and hit the plus sign. It'll open up your Finder or your Explorer and you can point it to images. So most of these images are either mine or my buddies that we've shared. So I try to be really considerate of the sky. And I'm going to tell you a quick story that most of you already know. So Renee Robin, who's now a good friend of mine, but we were at WPPI many years ago, and I had an image that went on the cover of PPA magazine. It merited and went low and all the beautiful things. And we're sitting around all of our friends at the bar like we do. And I was showing Renee some of my images, and she's like, "Oh, you replaced this guy, and you didn't do a good job." And then she went to critique me, and I mean, like, I had never met this woman before, right? Like, I had never met Renee before. And if you know Renee, like, she's very blunt.
Yeah.
And I just loved it so much, her candidness. But she wasn't wrong. I didn't look at the light direction properly, but it still went lone and it still got on the cover of PPA magazine. So whatever.
Right.
So what I'm going to suggest is that and I've learned my lesson. One, be better at your sky picks and don't show them to Renee unless you you want an honest. So try to pick an image, a sky that you think that will blend. Okay, try to get something that looks like it belongs in that scene and something that has light direction. And sometimes that's not always easy, but you got to work at it, right? So like this image, I think works pretty good. So once you've sort of selected that image, you select off that dialog box, and then you have all these sliders. I don't like any of these sliders. I turn off foreground lighting, edge lighting, and color adjustment because I think it contaminates my original image. And what it's doing is it's trying to blend those things in for you. I'm not a fan of that. I'll do that blending and stuff later if I want to. So that's the short of that. So I'll add that. And then what you'll get is you get a layer up here, right? Which is basically your sky replacement. And for me, the most important thing you can do is grab this opacity slider and pull it down. Oops, I grabbed the wrong slider. I mean, the wrong layer. Grab the sky, grab that opacity slider and get it down to about 30, 40%. And that's the sky that you want because it looks natural. It's subtle. It's not super dramatic. It doesn't bleed into your other objects. It's really easy, right? And honestly, like if we have a sky that's like this, or let's do it like, what is that? That's like 22%. That's an improvement. I mean, I think that's a significant improvement. And that's what I would do for my clients. That's what I would do. I add a very, very subtle sky. And it makes it harder for Renee to pick on me. Let me see.
I
Does that
say
make
we
sense?
challenge that theory, Troy.
Yeah, let's not do that. God, I don't even know. I don't even know where I would.
I know Renee as well. She's actually lives in my city. We're both in Edmonton.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, so I've known Renee since she was actually a model. She modeled for me 12 years ago. That's when I met her actually. She was a model.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
I don't think. Oh, wait, I do have demo images. Okay, maybe this will
So
work
I've
better
seen
in
her
here.
whole journey into, this whole, she's become quite well known for what she does. And of course, yeah,
Yeah.
she's got some strong opinions on AI.
Yep. Yeah, she's shared a lot of information about AI. We've done a lot of challenges in the TWIP community playing with AI and stuff like
I
that.
watched one
So
that you guys did where she came up with a bunch that she quizzed everybody as to which ones were AI and which ones were real, and it's not that easy always to tell.
no, no. I was gonna try to find you guys an
Videos
image
as
that I
well, Sora videos.
say it again.
Have you seen the new AI videos? They're made by something called Sora.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few companies now that are doing AI videos.
They're
Some
scary.
of them are amazing, some of them, but they're amazing. And it's the worst, this is the worst it's ever going to be.
Right.
So,
Well, the one guy that reviewed it when it first came out, he said, let's put this in perspective. He said a year ago we were watching a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti that looked, like a cartoon, and now we have this that's pretty darn realistic, and
yeah.
stuff like the ones that are good are like the scenic things, and we can already see it putting guys who fly drones out of a job, right? That do drone
Yep.
shots like aerials and stuff. What do you need a drone operator for anymore?
Yep. Yep. I agree. I agree. So this is a really good example again, and maybe this is a little bit more complicated. So Cheryl, I don't know if this maybe leans into something where you would have to work with. You can see how in the trees it doesn't quite look natural. Let's do something even more dramatic. Like
It's not bad.
we've seen these in competition though, and I know they're not real. And so that's the thing where you've got to be careful. I mean, if you want to use it as an artistic expression, like sure, go for it. Do whatever you want to do.
Can you blur it in Photoshop? Like blur your sky?
Yeah, I mean, you can blur the background, sure. Yeah, so I can select that image.
So the sky wouldn't be sharp.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So if we come in here, we just do a blur and we just do like a Gaussian blur, you can see like we can go pretty dramatic with the sky. But
'Cause
yeah, you absolutely
I'm looking at
absolutely
the
can.
bush behind him, right? If he's sharp and the bush is not, the sky's further behind than the bush, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that is really a telltale sign when you start to drop in things and they start to look fake.
There, so that's better.
Yeah, and that's why I suggest that even with something this dramatic, even with this kind of shot, that the best thing you can do is to pull that back, and get it back to a point to where like there, just there.
Mhm.
That looks real. I would put that in his album, right?
And
And
you
I
did
would
the sky replacement with that, and it got around all the leaves and stuff.
Yeah, it gets a you can kind of see if you look at the leaves, it's never going to be perfect. It's not going to do that, right? It's all you got all these little pockets and these little holes, but remember that I don't think that you ever want to do 100%. I think what you want to do is you want to pull that back so it's more of a subtle, and then you don't have those masking issues. You don't have those halos. You don't have those weird artifacts that you get when it's trying to mask around an object. That looks completely natural, right? And so even if you wanted to come in here, like Darlene said, and let's blur this some more, we can take that sky pretty far. Yeah, maybe like right there. And then if you want to add some warm tone to it, you could do the same thing like what Annette likes to do. You can bring that in, you can go into, camera raw, or we can just do like what would we do? Like hue, no, it's color balance. And then make that. There we go. And then I might add a little more warm, remembering that it's in a transparent layer. So that's, obviously I'm nowhere near as skilled as some Photoshop people are, right? But that's how I would add the sky. And that's what I would suggest that anybody that's looking to replace skies start with something that's really, really subtle. Sometimes the sky you can throw in, at like 100%. I mean, that looks like it's going to have a lot of impact, but that's not real. There's no way that's real, and it's up to you. So, Cheryl, did that make any sense?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, of course.
As a note
And
for Cheryl, I actually teach Luminar Neo, and Luminar has a sky replacement that I've compared to Photoshop. Like I've tried them side by side, and sometimes Luminar does a better job, and sometimes Photoshop does a better job. But I've actually noticed in cases like this where you are going into like the leaves or a tree or something where it's got like a difficult sky.
yeah,
Sorry, I got tickled. Luminar actually does a better job defining it.
yep.
What is that software?
Luminar Neo.
Okay.
Now, and this is just my personal opinion. I'm like I'm familiar with Luminar. I've been an affiliate of Luminar for a long time, so I play with Luminar too. I, before anybody, you guys, before you go out and you buy plugins, or before you go buy third-party software to try to do a thing, try to learn how to do it in Photoshop, because I think it's better for you to know how to do it in Photoshop and then buy a tool to make that process faster, as opposed to buying a tool that becomes a crutch and then you don't know how to do it at all. So when that tool goes away, or when they make a change, happens all the time, then you're screwed, right? So if you can't make a good black and white in your raw converter on your own, using like, Nick filters to create a black and white for you, that's a crutch. But if you can make that black and white and you can do it long form and you decide to use Nick filters, that's just an additive for your workflow. So spend some time learning how to do it, but definitely look at Luminar. Look at all of them. I mean, I own all the software. I'm a software addict. I have all the things, but I don't use any of them really. I make my own filters. I used Nick filters to show me how it would affect an image, and then I built all my own styles and presets so that I'm in control. So when Adobe changes something, or Capture One changes something, or Luminar changes something, I'm not stuck. So we will see you. Anybody else? Any questions? Are we good?
We're good.
All right.
Thanks for your time, Troy.
Yeah,
You got it, Bruce.
And thanks for keeping him on track, Dwayne.
Yeah.
I try, not very hard.
And thanks for letting me back in the room. My 7 a.m. was canceled, or p.m.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. And again, seriously, guys, like, if there's topics that you're interested in, if you want more information on this kind of thing, you know, as the leaders within the IEPPV group, I mean, you just let us know. Like, we're happy to spin up things that you may want to try. Like, we can't read your minds, so we'd love to hear from you. So, thanks everybody for showing up. I appreciate it. Good night, guys.
All right. Good night.
Yeah.